Hi, welcome to Demystifying Technology. I'm Brian Santo, editor of CED Magazine, and today we're talking about packaging and repackaging. Today's episode, we're here in Jakarta to explain the difference between packaging and repackaging. What you need to know first is that in multi-screen delivery, you're sending video content to a variety of different devices that are connected to a variety of different networks that all operate at different broadband speeds. So in order to make sure that you can get that content to those different devices, you need to format it in different ways and be able to send it at different speeds depending on what the network that the person subscribing to the service is actually able to get. So that ends up leading us to adaptive bit rate delivery, ABR. Adaptive bit rate lets you send video at in chunks that are appropriate to the broadband connection that the subscriber has. So I'm here with Duncan Potter of Seawell Networks. When you're delivering ABR video, in the past, when you delivered video, it was in one format. You didn't have to worry about it. You had one format to deal with, and that was it. With multi-screen video, multi-screen implies exactly what it is. You've got smartphones, you've got smart TVs, you've got tablets, you've got things of different size, and you've got different content delivery formats, different ways of delivering the video and different standards for that. That causes a lot of problems for how to manage all of those different formats. What's the problem? How do you solve handling all those different formats?
Well, if you look at the way that we dealt with things in the past, as you say, we were dealing with one content format. So what we've done is we've broken up the workflow process a little bit to be able to deal with some of this stuff. So in the old days, if you like, what we had was we had an encoder, packager, all in one, really in one self-contained unit. So the first thing that we've done is that happened really was that we broke apart the encoder and the packager. And the reason for that was really sort of two or threefold. The first piece was that you needed to be able to scale the packager much higher than you really needed to be able to scale the encoder. And this was a way of scaling very rapidly to deliver the number of streams that were actually necessary. The second thing that it gave us was it gave us an ability to cycle the technology within the packager much faster than we needed to do in the encoder. So there were some big advantages to being able to do that. The second thing that we then did is that we developed, if you like, two layers of packaging. The first one was to take the content directly from the encoder and package it into the ABR format. So that's where you create the bit rates. You do other things that the encoder packager complex needs to do in terms of things like add insertion markers and things like this. The second thing that we've done is we've developed this technology called dynamic repackaging. And this really addresses the cost and storage issue of transmitting multiple different bit rates across the infrastructure, because the packager moves the content to the origin, and then what happens is that in a straight delivery network, what you're doing is literally creating every bit rate for every channel or every VOD asset to every format. Okay, you can end up with literally thousands of different versions of the same content.
Right.
So to alleviate that, what we've done is developed a capability, the dynamic repackaging capability, that repackages from a single ABR, what's referred to as a mezzanine format,
Right.
into whatever is then required by the device. So you still have to store the 8-bit rates, but what this means is that if you're servicing Apple iOS devices, or you're servicing an Xbox community, or smart TVs maybe running a variant of MPEG Dash, which we're starting to see emerge now, all of those are actually repackaged dynamically. So that reduces the cost of the CDN if you're actually using a CDN. and it dramatically saves. It can reduce the storage cost, especially of any edge cache or mid-tier cache that you've got. It can also dramatically reduce your network costs. Now, for a large MSO, that may not be that important because they've got a very big infrastructure that they own. But for smaller organizations that depend on other people or other organizations to deliver the network bandwidth for which they pay for every byte,
Right.
that can have an enormous cost-saving advantage if they're really trying to broaden their subscriber base by getting to all these different types of devices.
Excellent. So basically with repackaging, you can perhaps think of it as just-in-time packaging. You've got instead of having multiple iterations of the same asset over and over and over again, so that's clearly saving the storage space. The idea is to use this mezzanine format and package it only when it's required in the way it's required.
Well, it's interesting because we've seen a lot of different sort of variants of this particular technology, and some of them have actually been branded individually, for their different type. So typically, just-in-time packaging or just-in-time repackaging is marketed by some companies that are focused on the head end.
Okay.
Right. So it certainly provides you with a level of dynamic, cost-saving advantage. When we're really talking about true sort of dynamic repackaging, typically what we're then talking about is something that's distributed right down to the edge of the network.
Okay.
So the benefit of that true dynamic repackaging is that what you're really dealing with then is that you're actually saving the network traversement cost, or the cost of traversing the network. So in terms of the sense of the words, you're absolutely right. It's just-in-time repackaging. In terms of the way that you're going to see this marketed, you have to be very careful to sort of pull apart what they actually mean.
As we know, when you're putting together a content stream, it's not just the show. There are other things that are attached to that content. Are there advantages to a repackaging scheme for making sure that you can put a content package together?
Oh, very definitely. So I think a lot of the challenges that we've seen with the confusion around things like ad insertion is that, in the last series you talked about manifest manipulation and making sure that the ad actually could be inserted inside the manifest.
Right.
Now the challenge that you have when you're actually going off to devices that don't support discontinuity, in other words, the ability to sort of ignore the container format information and just play the content, is that in protocols like Microsoft Smooth, under certain circumstances with certain types of Android devices with HLS, with MPEG-AVC264, which is the most common one that's out there right now, and certainly with Adobe HDS, what you have to be able to do if your mezzanine format, for instance, is HLS, is that you really have to be able to make sure that all of the container format timers, the things that the player is expecting to see to be sequential, need to be adjusted to make sure that they look to the player like they actually are sequential.
Right.
And that, because you've got the dynamic repackaging capability, what you do have the capability to do at that point, assuming that you're using products from somebody like ourselves, is that you have the ability to solve all of those problems and make sure that the quality of experience is really TV-like when it comes to things like ad insertion, alternate content, or what we call blackout. Moving over to an alternate stream if something's blacked out in a particular geography, for instance. So there's a lot of advantages of this approach in terms of those other services that are so important for monetization and compliance, quite frankly.
Right. So there you have it, packaging. That's what you do to get the content initially ready for delivery. Repackaging, that's what you do when you've actually got a request for some content and you're going to ship it and send it. I'm Brian Santo for CED. This is Demystifying Technology.